Hey guys, Lisa here, and this video is a behind the scenes look at my struggle. So I'm new to Unity, and with the exception of making a triangle move using arrow keys, I have no experience making games. In this video I'm going to try to get our characters to move using a touchscreen. By the end of this I hope to have them jumping, ducking, and switching poses each time they move left or right. Tall order, I know, but I'll do my best to deliver. First things first, I created a scene in Unity using the rough assets Stanley made. I made sure to put most of the assets on their own layers. Then I added a character and some enemies. It's not very exciting when I play my game right now, as everything is stationary. Nothing a little code won't fix. Or I guess I could troubleshoot why Unity's remote play feature isn't working on my phone. Why not? Following the Unity documentation, I downloaded Android Studio. Then I bashed my head against the wall for an hour. Since you probably don't want to see that, here are some funny glitches from our Instagram. Why won't you work? Why won't you work? Come on, seriously! I just installed this! Why is it not showing up? Ow. One concussion later, remote play still refused to work. But rather than admit defeat, I used a workaround. I would just build the app in Unity and send it to my phone. The downside? Waiting. However, I do get remote play working eventually. Now that I had a way to test my game, it was time to start coding. At this stage, I just had a basic input script. Shout out to Alexander for his extremely helpful touch input tutorial. Basically, the script records the player's swipe by noting down where they first touch the screen and where they stop touching the screen. Then it uses this data to determine if you swiped right or left, and moves the character accordingly. Now the character can move across the screen. With that working, it was time to have the character pose each time they moved. It took a lot of Googling to figure out how to change out the sprite using the script. Eventually I found a solution. For a weird test, I ended up having the character change from male to female depending on if you were moving right or left. Later I added various poses I requested from Stanley and listed them in the script. Now the character would face left or right based on the swipe. Next I had to make the character pose a different way each time they moved. I used a random number generator and set a limit. I was going to have all the poses in a list and use the random number as an index, but that turned out to be a dead end. Instead I went with a switch statement, so now the computer would randomly choose a pose. So that's it, we're done, right? Well, not quite. I found that in practice I get a ton of duplicate poses rather than a new one each time. So I added a while loop. Now if the computer generated the same number twice, it would loop until it got a different number. Also, I noticed that the character would float in some poses. It turned out to be an issue with the Sprite Sheet. So I edited the floating sprites using paint.net, and that solved the problem. Now I needed to find a way to toggle the characters for testing. This, like everything else, took a bit of research. Also, I am toggling between Notepad++ and brackets for writing code in this video. I eventually settled on Atom, but you won't see me using it this time. Anyway, I started writing the character selection script. The hardest part was toggling the visibility of the characters. I ended up making a script for each character, which I deleted in the next video. Also, during all of this testing, I noticed more floating sprites and fixed them. I also added a character selection menu, but I ended up scrapping it. I'll revisit it next time though. With all that out of the way, it was time to work on jumping. I've never had much luck with making characters jump. This is probably because I wasn't using a physics engine, although even with Unity I managed to duplicate this issue. This is because instead of using gravity, I just moved the character up. Then the computer would wait a bit to move him down. When I did later decide to use gravity, I ended up having to add hitboxes to the character and the stage. That way the character wouldn't fall through the world. I also had to change the sprite when the character jumps and return it to the previous pose when the character lands. That took a lot of trial and error. I had to eventually add limiters to my code to prevent the player from moving left or right while jumping, or jumping while in the air. Once I was in a good place, I cleaned up my code by putting snippets of it in functions. I later noticed that there was issues with the touch input, namely if I tapped the screen, my character would go crazy. I used the console to figure out the difference between a tap and a swipe. Now the character only moves when you swipe. Then I ran into another movement issue. Sometimes when I wanted to move left or right, I would end up jumping or ducking. After using the console to view my recorded swipes, I noticed that I don't always swipe on a completely straight line if it's up or down. There's always a slight diagonal to it. So I added some code to compensate for this, since nobody's perfect. Also, when I added a hitbox to the characters, I noticed that sometimes they would get stuck when they jumped. It turns out I had to toggle off the hitbox on the character that wasn't selected, as it was interfering, so I just added that to the character selection scripts. I also ended up adjusting the hitbox quite a bit, so that the character wouldn't slightly sink when they appeared on screen and that the hitbox wouldn't be bigger than the character itself. I also had to tell the computer where the heck the ground is, so that was fun. Now for ducking. I ended up having to add a delay so the character wouldn't spring up too quickly. I also made sure that you couldn't duck in the air, and that you were facing the correct direction while ducking. Now that everything was working, I went back and added comments. I also built a demo for Stanley to try out. And there we go! Now the basic movement is working. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, please drop a like and subscribe, as we'll be giving you more videos very soon. See you next time!